Have you ever found yourself rooting for a character you know you probably shouldn't? The scoundrel, the rogue, the anti-hero? Well, if you have, you can thank an 18th century writer named Tobias Smollett. Today, we're jumping into his wild, satirical world and the new kind of hero he helped bring to life.
Okay, let's just get right into it. Think about your favorite characters from, well, anything you're watching right now. How many of them are kind of morally gray? Flawed, a little rough around the edges, but you're still on their side. This love we have for the imperfect hero, it's not a new thing. It has some really deep roots in literary history.
And that history leads us straight to a very specific kind of story, one that pretty much perfected the art of the charming troublemaker, the rogue's tale. So this genre has a name. It's called the Picaresque novel. And at its core, it's a story about a clever, usually pretty poor hero, they call them a picaro, who basically has to survive by their wits in a world that's even more messed up than they are. Their journey isn't some grand, noble quest. Nope. It's about getting by. And that setup, well, it gives the author the perfect stage to poke fun at the society they're living in.
Which brings us to the man of the hour. Because back in 18th century Britain, one author really became the absolute master of this style. Tobias Smollett.
So, Smollett was born in Scotland, way back in 1721. His whole life was set right in the heart of the 18th century. And this was a time of massive social change, which he watched with a really sharp and, let's be honest, pretty critical eye. And look, don't just take my word for how important this guy was. His super famous contemporary, Dr. Samuel Johnson, called him the great Sham of literature. Now, you might be wondering, what's a Sham? It's an old word for a powerful ruler, like a Khan. It was Johnson's way of saying Smollett was a total powerhouse in the literary world. So let's break it down. Who was this guy? Well, for starters, he was a Scottish writer who did it all: novels, history, criticism. But his real gift was his knack for just getting people. He was famous for his writing style, which was just bursting with energy, and for his really sharp, biting satire. He used humor like a surgeon's scalpel to cut into the moral and social problems of his time. All right, so let's get into his books. Honestly, the best way to understand Smollett is to make his unforgettable cast of characters, his gallery of rogues. First up is The Adventures of Roderick Random. This was his first big novel, and it's the perfect example of a picaresque story. It follows this kid, Roderick, who has no money and no status, and he just gets thrown into the deep end of 18th century life. And through Roderick's crazy journey, Smollett paints this incredibly vivid and often pretty brutal picture of the world. Then, just 3 years later, he gave us The Adventures of Peregrine Pickle. And if you thought Roderick was a handful, Peregrine is on another level. This guy is impulsive, stubborn, and always getting into trouble. His misadventures are basically just an excuse for Smollett to absolutely skewer the big institutions of the day: marriage, politics, the law, you name it. It's a masterclass in satire. But here's the thing. It would be a huge mistake to just think of Smollett as the picaresque guy. He had incredible range, and his work really grew and changed over his career. He was definitely not a one-trick pony. I mean, just look at this timeline. In 1753, he writes Ferdinand Count Fathom, which gives us an even darker, more morally ambiguous hero. Then, jump ahead to 1766, and he's writing a non-fiction travel book, but it's still packed with that signature social commentary. And then his last novel, Humphry Clinker, is just brilliant. It's told entirely through letters from different characters, giving you all these amazing different points of view. And on top of all that, he was a serious scholar. He translated Cervantes' Don Quixote, the original picaresque novel. And he also wrote a massive multi-volume complete history of England. The sheer amount of work this guy produced is just incredible. So we're talking about a man writing almost 300 years ago. The big question is, why does he still matter? What is his lasting impact on us today? Well, his legacy is huge. For one, he was a true pioneer of the picaresque novel in English. He perfected using satire to hold a mirror up to society and show all its cracks. But most importantly, he gave us these unforgettable anti-heroes. Seriously, his stories about flawed people just trying to make their way through a crazy world, that's basically the DNA of so much of what we watch and read today. And that leaves us with one final thought. Smollett used the popular media of his day, the novel, to tell these funny, critical, and deeply human stories about the world he saw. So when you look at our world with this endless fire hose of content, who are our modern Smolletts? Who's using our media to tell those same kinds of roguish tales? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.